Chapter 18. In the morning I lay abed, listening to the soft, steady patter of rain upon our tent. The sound reminded me that the weather was outside. I was within, dry and warm, a sweet and soothing feeling. I'd been so tired the night before that I'd fallen asleep in my clothing. A night of dancing followed by a day of hard rowing will cause fatigue. That led me to think, with more pleasure, about the day before. I recalled, too, that Mother must surely come soon, and Father was due in a few days. They would, I hoped, be proud of me for having managed myself and Jacob so well. All this put me in such good spirits that I called out a "Good morning" to Jacob, but received no reply. Belatedly, I remembered that when I returned late the night before, he was not in his bed. I lay there, choosing to believe his absence was his way of showing resentment for my spending the day with Thad. Moments later I told myself surely by this time he would have come back. I decided he was most likely with Señor Rosales. I also considered the possibility that he had gone to Portsmouth Square to look for gold. The low angle of the sun, if there was sun, sparked lost grains. Mornings were the best time to look, since drunken men stumbled about late at night. If I found Jacob there, I knew he'd tease me. He was working when I slept. That reminded me I'd promised Mr. Lyle the carpenter that I'd work with him that day. I drew out my money belt from under my bed, checked for my money and knife, fastened it around my waist, and told myself that I needed to make sure Jacob was all right before I set off for work. I stuck my head out of our tent. It was still drizzling and too overcast to establish the time. Across the way, despite the inclement weather, the San Francisco Cafe restaurant was open for business, with a few customers waiting in line to be served. As always, Señor Rosales was at his stove, cooking, smoke rising up through his tin chimney. "Buenos dias, Señor Rosales," I called as I walked over. It was clear right away that Jacob was not there. I told the señor what happened to Thad and me, that when I got back Jacob was gone. "Have you seen him?" "Lo siento. Sorry to hear what happened, Corderita," said Señor Rosales. "All I can tell you is your hermano, your brother, was worried about you." "He's always worried," I said. "True, but this time, más. To tell you my thoughts, señorita, I think él se siente solo. He was feeling lonely, more than usual. It's what I told your father. Not wise to leave him solo, alone." "I told Jacob he could come with us," I said, somewhat uncomfortable, aware that I had not truly encouraged him to come down the bay. "Can I give you some breakfast?" Señor Rosales offered me a piece of beef, which I quickly ate. "I have to go to work," I announced. "If you see Jacob, por favor, señor, tell him I'm working with Mr. Lyle. Ask him to come to me." "Absolutamente, Corderita." I stood before our tent, not sure what to do, work or find Jacob. A younger brother who hampers one's life is most irritating. All the same, I felt I should locate him, tell him where I'd be, that we should have dinner together, my way of absolving myself for slighting him the day before. I hurried over to Portsmouth Square, but he was not on the grounds. I eyed the gambling places. Whenever I passed by the entryways of the Parker House and the El Dorado, I heard shouts, laughter, screams, and music. Often horrid fights broke out among the men. Once, when passing a saloon, I heard pistol shots. Greatly frightened, I had watched as a dead man was borne away on an old door. Alas, such violence was common in this wild city. Though I much doubted Jacob had gone into either place, I told myself that if I was going to solve the aggravating puzzle of his whereabouts, I should make sure. I went into El Dorado. Unlike the night of the dance, gambling and drinking were already going on. I was bumped, shoved, and generally stomped on by the crowd of tough, loud-mouthed men and a few women. It didn't take long to determine that Jacob wasn't there. Then I did a quick check of the post office. He was not standing in the lines waiting for mail. I made a return trip to our tent in hopes he had come back. He had not, nor had Señor Rosales caught sight of him. It was about then that I began to truly worry. It was absolutely not like Jacob to stay away for so long. The rain had lessened and the morning fog had thinned, enough so that I could look down at the bay and Rotten Row. I saw the ship that Jacob had pointed out, the Yankee Sword. She was still there. Remembering our last conversation, I wondered, could he have in fact signed on? No, I refused to consider such a possibility. Jacob would never do something that would be so unusual for him. Seeing that new ships had arrived, I considered that he might be at the Cove beach, and Hope's mother had arrived. That would be something he would do. Going downhill, I passed some frame houses being built, on places which had been mud a couple of days ago. I even passed Mr. Lyle, the carpenter, had promised to help. "Hey, Miss Torrey," he called, "you're late." "I need to find Jacob," I called back. "Have you seen him?" "Nope, but I can use him too." "Soon as I find him, I'll come," I said, gave a wave, and continued on. At the Cove beach, lighters were hauling in throngs of newcomers and their baggage. Other boats were bringing men back from the diggings. The contrast was extreme. Newcomers happy and excited, returning miners emaciated, filthy, and dispirited, shivering with malarial fevers. I suddenly felt a twinge of Jacob's apprehension. What if father did not return? What if he was ill, injured, had found no gold? All were real possibilities. There was no sign of Jacob among the onlookers at the Cove, nor, for that matter, of mother. I did remind myself that I had an obligation to replace the oar I had broken the day before. Then it also occurred to me that perhaps Jacob, in search of me, while I was looking for him, might have gone to see Thad. I hurried over to the store where Thad clerked. The Howard and Mellis store sold all kinds of the dry goods that miners needed, from slouch hats to shoes, picks to pans, and the things ships required. The store even posted ship arrivals and departures. As usual, it was crowded, and it was almost comical to watch the faces of newcomers when they were told the prices of the things they desired. $50 for a pickaxe, $40 for a pound of coffee. I found Thad at the back of the store piling up canvas trousers. "Morning," he called when he saw me. "I put aside a new oar for that boat we used." $40. But I lost 25 at the tables this morning. "I'll owe you. Jacob back?" I was annoyed by his betting, but being more concerned with Jacob, I only replied to his question, "Not yet. You asked Señor Rosales?" "He said Jacob was looking for me. That if he comes by, tell him I'll be working with Mr. Lyle, or to go back to the tent and wait." "Yeah, he'll show up." He fetched the new oar which I signed for, and brought back to the Cove and left in the boat we had borrowed. Then I sat in the boat. Dejected, growing ever more concerned, I tried to think where I might look for Jacob. I needed to find him to settle myself. Near the building where Thad worked was the Mercury Saloon. The Mercury was one of those ships that had been left in Rotten Row. Somebody had purchased her and hauled her hulk over the Yerba Buena Cove flats. With pilings made from her mast, she was fixed against the new Central Wharf and turned into a building, a gambling saloon. For San Francisco that was not unusual. Right across the way another ship, the Euphemia, still afloat, was being turned into a new city jail. Other empty boats had become hotels, warehouses, and hospitals. One was becoming a church. As for the landlocked Mercury, her bow had been sawed off and squared. Over the entryway was a sloping roof where the name Mercury Saloon had been painted in huge letters. Since the saloon was right on the Cove shore, miners came directly from the diggings up bay and began to gamble with their new-found gold. Some won, most lost and did so quickly. As a result, the place was always full of the frenzy of hope and desperation, as these men cast away what they had worked so hard to get. The Mercury fascinated many, including Thad. Jacob knew he liked going in. Hadn't Thad even gone in this morning? Jacob also knew I'd been there any number of times trying to get Thaddeus to leave. It occurred to me that perhaps Jacob went to the Mercury to look for us, and that someone had seen him. But with the Mercury's reputation for being one of the worst saloons, you may be sure I liked it no more than the places on Portsmouth Square. I was reluctant to go inside. "Stop making excuses, Torrey," I told myself. "You need to find Jacob." I went in.